I caught her before she hit the ground. My sister, my little sister, barely a year younger than me, collapsed the moment I opened the front door, like she'd been holding herself together just long enough to get to my porch. I grabbed her arms and pulled her inside, and that's when I saw them. Bruises along her collarbone, a cut above her eyebrow that had dried dark, her left wrist wrapped in an elastic bandage she'd clearly put on herself. Rachel. My voice came out steadier than I felt. Who did this to you? She didn't answer right away. She just sat on my couch, staring at the coffee table, her hands folded in her lap like she was trying to make herself smaller. I'd seen that posture before, not on her, but on women I'd worked with during my 2 tours as a military police officer. Women who had spent so long being told they deserved what was happening to them that they'd started to believe it. It was Daniel, she finally said. I already knew. I just needed her to say it out loud. Rachel and I grew up in Clarksburg, West Virginia, in a house on a quiet street where everyone knew everyone in trouble was supposed to stay outside the county line. Our mother raised us to be strong, not aggressive, not loud, just the kind of strong that means you don't quit, you don't fold, and you don't let someone take from you what isn't theirs to take. I carried that with me into the Army at 19. Rachel carried it into nursing school. She met Daniel Mercer when she was 24. He was a contractor, good-looking, confident, the kind of man who walked into a room and immediately started working it. He had a way of making you feel like the most important person in his world, and for a while, I think Rachel genuinely was. I had my concerns early. Small things. The way he'd answer questions that were directed at her. The way he'd make jokes at her expense and then look around to see who laughed. I mentioned it to my mother once, and she told me I was being protective to the point of paranoia. Maybe I was. I was still adjusting to civilian life, still carrying the hypervigilance I'd picked up overseas, still reading every room like it was a potential threat. So I stayed quiet. I watched. They got married in June, 3 years after they met. It was a beautiful wedding. Rachel wore our grandmother's pearl earrings. Daniel cried during the vows. I stood beside my sister and told myself I'd been wrong about him. For a while, I almost believed it. The first sign that something was wrong came about 8 months after the wedding. I called Rachel on a Tuesday night. We used to talk every week, usually on Tuesdays, and Daniel answered her phone. "She's sleeping," he said. It was 7:30 in the evening. I asked him to have her call me back when she woke up. She didn't call back that night, or the next day. When she finally called, 4 days later, she sounded tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. "Is everything okay?" I asked. "Of course," she said. "Why wouldn't it be?" That became a pattern. The calls got shorter. The gaps between them got longer. She stopped coming home for holidays, always with an excuse. Daniel had work commitments. His family needed them. It was too far a drive. I drove 4 hours to see her twice that year. Both times, Daniel was home. Both times, the visit felt monitored. The second time I visited, I noticed she'd stopped wearing short sleeves. I didn't say anything. I was scared of being wrong. I was more scared of being right and saying something that would make her pull away completely. The night she showed up at my door, it was a Thursday in February. I was living in Morgantown by then, about 90 minutes from where she and Daniel had settled in a suburb outside Charleston. She'd driven through a sleet storm to get to me. "How long?" I asked. Once I'd made her tea and sat across from her, she stared at the mug. "Longer than I want to say." "Rachel, about a year after the wedding," she said it quietly, like she was confessing something she'd done, not something that had been done to her. "It started with grabbing, then pushing, then she stopped, took a breath. It escalated." I made myself stay calm. I'd learned a long time ago that when someone is finally telling you something they've never told anyone else, the worst thing you can do is react in a way that makes the conversation about your feelings instead of theirs. "Why didn't you call the police?" I asked. She laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "Because he is friends with half the department in our county. We've been to their barbecues. He coaches one of their kids in Little League." She finally looked up at me. "Who's going to believe me?" "I believe you," I said. She wiped her eyes. "He controls everything, you know. The accounts are in his name. My paychecks go into a joint account that he monitors. If I buy something without telling him, I hear about it. I've been saving cash from grocery change for 7 months." She reached into her coat pocket and showed me a small envelope. There couldn't have been more than $200 in it. "This is my escape fund." I had to look away for a moment. "Does he know you're here?" I told him I was staying with a coworker. He doesn't know where you live. I made sure to never tell him your address. That part was deliberate, I realized. Somewhere in the back of her mind, she'd been protecting this. Protecting me as an option, even when she wasn't ready to use it. Is there anything at the house you need? My mother's ring, she said. It's in a box in the closet. And my nursing license documents. He hid them once before. I found them again. But she shook her head. Are there children involved? No. A pause. Thank God. No. I nodded slowly. I was already thinking. Not emotionally, that came later, when I was alone. In that moment, I was doing what my training had built into me. Assessing. Identifying obstacles. Planning. I want you to stay here tonight, I said. Sleep. We'll talk more in the morning. She slept for 11 hours straight. Here is what I knew about Daniel Mercer from my 2 visits and everything Rachel had told me over the years. He was strategic. He didn't blow up in public. He was charming to everyone outside the house and methodical about everything inside it. He controlled the money, the schedule, the social calendar, and Rachel's access to her own family. Men like that don't respond to requests or confrontations in any conventional way. They reframe, deny, and manipulate. They use the systems built to protect people as weapons against them. I knew that if Rachel simply left, he would file for everything he could in their county, in front of judges who knew him at church. She needed documentation, she needed her property, and she needed to leave in a way that didn't give him time to move assets or poison the well with the people who mattered. I also knew I needed help. I called my old unit commander, Captain Sheila Bradshaw, who had left the Army 2 years before me, and now worked as a civilian advocate for domestic violence survivors in the tri-state area. She'd seen hundreds of cases. She knew the legal landscape, the shelters, the attorneys who wouldn't flinch. I need to get my sister out, I said. Safely, legally, with documentation. Is she ready? Sheila asked. I thought about Rachel sleeping on my couch, still in her coat because she'd been too exhausted to take it off. She drove 90 minutes through sleet to get here, I said. She's ready. We made a plan. The following Saturday, Daniel thought Rachel was coming home. He'd been texting her since Thursday. At first, the messages were casual, almost warm. Hey, just checking in. Miss you. By Friday afternoon, they'd shifted. You need to come home. We should talk. By Friday night. Rachel, answer me. She showed me every one. I photographed them. I drove to Charleston alone. Rachel stayed in Morgantown with Sheila, who was helping her fill out intake paperwork with a DV organization and connect with an attorney who worked on contingency for cases like hers. Rachel had given me her key. She'd told me exactly where everything was. Her mother's ring in a cedar box on the top shelf of the bedroom closet, her nursing documents in a manila folder behind the winter coats. Her personal photos were in a box under the bed. A small piece of jewelry she'd inherited from our aunt was in the bathroom drawer. I also brought a small digital recorder, which was legal in West Virginia for single-party consent recording. I let myself in through the garage. I'd been in the house twice before, but both times had felt like visiting a display, everything positioned to look like a normal, happy home. Alone, I could see it differently. The door to the second bedroom was locked, which was strange. 3 separate deadbolts on the front door, none of which Rachel had keys to. A small camera mounted above the kitchen, the kind sold as a security device but angled to cover the interior of the house, not any entry point. I took photographs of the camera. I retrieved Rachel's belongings. I put everything in the bag I'd brought, then I sat down in the living room and I waited. He came home at 2 in the afternoon. He walked in through the garage, dropped his keys on the counter, and stopped when he saw me sitting on his couch. For about 3 seconds, his face went through several calculations. Then he smiled. Well, he said, this is unexpected. Sit down, Daniel. I don't think you're in a position to tell me to do anything in my own house. But his voice was careful. He was reading me, trying to figure out what I knew and how much of a problem I was going to be. Rachel's not coming back, I said. She's safe. She's with people who are helping her. By Monday, she'll have met with an attorney. I want you to know that clearly, before we talk. He leaned against the kitchen counter and crossed his arms. The smile was still there, but tighter now. Your sister has some issues. Mental health things. I've been trying to get her help for a long time, but she's resistant. Whatever she's told you, she didn't just tell me, I said. She showed me, and I photographed everything before she was treated. The smile faded. I also found the interior camera. I held up my phone with the photo on it. You want to explain to a judge why the security camera in your house points inward? He was quiet for a moment. I could see him recalculating. You should be careful, he said, quietly. You're in my house. You used her key without my permission. There are laws. The key was given to me by the co-owner of this home, I said. West Virginia is a marital property state. And this conversation is being recorded, which is legal here, under single-party consent. I held up the recorder briefly, then set it on the coffee table. I want you to hear yourself right now. I want you to think about what you're going to say next. He stared at the recorder. Then he stared at me. What do you want? He finally said. I want you to agree not to contest the separation. I want you to return full access to the joint accounts to Rachel immediately. I want you to make no contact with her workplace, or her family, and I want you to understand that if you violate any of those things, if you show up where she is, if you call her employer, if you do anything to interfere with her life going forward, every photograph, every text message, every piece of documentation I have goes directly to law enforcement, to the state nursing board on your construction license, and to the local paper. He said nothing for a long time. You think you're protecting her, he said finally. His voice had gone flat. You don't know her like I do. You don't know what she's like when... Stop. I stood up. I'm not a tall woman, but I spent years training for exactly the kind of physical and psychological pressure that civilian life rarely demands. I've stood in rooms with people who wanted to intimidate me, and I have never once flinched first. I know exactly what she's like. I know she's funny and stubborn, and she stayed up with me the whole night before my first deployment because she was scared and didn't want me to know. I know she used grocery change to build an escape fund because you took everything else from her. I picked up the recorder and my bag. I know her better than you ever will, and I am telling you very clearly to leave her alone. I walked out through the garage. My hands were shaking by the time I got to the car. I sat there for a full minute before I started the engine. Then I drove home to my sister. The next several weeks were not simple. Anyone who tells you that leaving an abusive marriage is just a matter of walking out has never lived inside one. There were legal proceedings and financial untangling, and days when Rachel called me in tears, not because she missed Daniel, but because she missed who she'd believed he was when they first met. She missed the version of her life she'd thought she was building. Grief is complicated when what you're grieving was never really real. I stayed with her as much as I could. Sheila connected her with a counselor who specialized in trauma recovery. Her nursing director, who was a quiet and unshakable woman named Mrs. Patterson, made sure Rachel's job was protected throughout the process. Daniel did try, once, to make contact. He called her work line 3 weeks after I'd visited the house. Rachel didn't answer. Her attorney sent a letter the following morning. He didn't try again. The divorce was finalized 5 months later. Rachel got her share of the marital assets, including enough to put a deposit on a small apartment in Morgantown, 20 minutes from me. The week she moved in, we unpacked boxes together and ordered pizza, and sat on her new living room floor because she didn't have furniture yet. She laughed about something, I don't even remember what, and it was the first time in years I heard her laugh like she used to. Easy, unguarded, like she didn't have to check first whether it was safe. I cried later, alone in my car before I drove home. Not sad tears. The other kind. There is something I want to say to anyone who is watching this and recognizing something in Rachel's story. The financial control is abuse. The isolation is abuse. Not being allowed to know your own account balance or buy a bottle of shampoo without reporting it, that is abuse, even when there are no bruises to photograph. Rachel spent years questioning her own perception of her life because the abuse she experienced wasn't always visible. He was so careful about that. If you are in a situation like hers, I want you to know what I told her the morning after she arrived at my door. You are not crazy. You are not exaggerating. The fact that you've started to wonder whether you deserve it is one of the clearest signs that something is very wrong. And if you have someone in your life, a sister, a brother, a friend who you suspect is being hurt, please don't wait for them to come to you with visible injuries. Check in. Make yourself a safe place. Let them know, without pressure, that the door is open. Rachel had been building toward leaving for 3 years. What she needed, in the end, was to know that someone was on the other side of the door. I was lucky. I got to be that person for her. Not everyone has a Rachel who makes it to the porch. 3 months ago, Rachel started volunteering 2 evenings a week at a local DV resource center, helping women with safety planning and connecting them with legal aid. She told me she almost didn't, because she wasn't sure she was far enough along in her own recovery to sit with someone else's pain. I told her that maybe that was exactly why she was the right person to do it. She sent me a text last Tuesday that said, "Had a woman come in tonight who reminded me of me. Stayed with her for 2 hours. She's going to be okay." I read that message 5 times. We talk every Tuesday again, just like we used to. Sometimes it's a 5-minute call, just to check in. Sometimes we talk for 2 hours about nothing important. I don't take a single one of those calls for granted. She's my sister. She always was the brave one, she just didn't know it yet.